everybody, and we are live. It is the 30th of July. How did we get to the end of July already? Where is this year going? And we have got such an important subject we're going to be talking about today. We've got people coming in from all over the world. It's great to see you. If you're out there in LinkedIn world, in YouTube world, then join in the conversation, write in the comments box, tell us who you are, what you are, tell us what's going on in your world. So today we're talking about a really, really interesting subject. And I can honestly say we've been doing this show for 5 years. I've been running conferences in this business for way longer than that. And I think we picked up a subject that has never, ever been talked about before on any platform at any event. So this is a real first. We're going to be talking about a subject called managing immigration anxiety. What do you feel like when you're going through and having your passport looked at as you go through border control, as you're walking through customs? What's it like, not just for you, but for all the people that you're looking after when they're applying for their visas? Tell us about immigration anxiety, the psychology of immigration. Let's just forget the legal stuff for a moment, the practical stuff, the psychology. It is a fascinating topic and everybody has got strong viewpoints on it. And we're really going to deep dive into that today. So that's today's conversation. We are live on LinkedIn. We are live on YouTube. We're also available on Spotify for those of you who want to see us or listen to us as a podcast. And I know a number of you who come along to our show, you want to get your CPE codes, you want to get your codes from ERC, from SHRM, from HRCI. Well, we have them all. I'll put them up here now. So whether you want your ERC codes, and many thanks to everybody there, we've got the GMS and the CRP codes, whether you want the codes for SHRM or for HRCI, and many, many thanks to our good friends at Rocket Mortgage for organizing that. So that's all that. We've got a lot of really great we've got a lot of great codes there for you if you want those. What about next week? Well, next week we're on summer break. It's a vacation. So we will not be live next week. We will see you the other side. We're taking August off, but we will be showing some classic episodes of the show from previous weeks in the past. So there'll still be something running on LinkedIn. It's just, it'll be a repeat of some of the classic shows that we've had. We've got Nazia coming in from Dubai. We've had people coming in from all over the world. So we're going to move on. We're going to share some breaking news now. What has been going on in the wonderful world of global mobility in the last 7 days? Let's run that and see what's been going on in our wonderful world over the last 7 days. So there we have it. Congratulations to everyone who's been promoted, to everyone who's got a new job. And if you're looking for a job, well, there's plenty of jobs out there. Now, if you've got a job offer that you want to share, that you've got a role you want to get filled, tell us and we'll try and post it on the show. If you've had a promotion or got a new job, again, let us know and we'll see if we can give you some publicity. So that's the breaking news. Actually, talking of breaking news, I also just want to spend a moment to say we're thinking of and wishing all the best to everybody who has been impacted by the overnight tsunami. And I know people have been evacuated and it's sounding like it's hopefully not as bad as people first feared. But obviously these things are incredibly stressful and awful for everybody involved. And we just say that we at The View from the Top and at BINEVO and all our guests are thinking of you all and wishing you all the best. And hopefully things are not as bad as everybody had feared initially. So sending love to everybody. We're now going to move on. We've now got our immigration update. Julie Onslow-Cole cannot be with us today, but I'm so excited. For the very first time on this show, we have the wonderful Raj Mann from Fragment. So everybody, let's give a really, really big welcome to Raj. So you know how to do it, everybody. Hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button, and let's welcome onto the View from the Top stage the wonderful Raj Mann. Welcome to the show.
Great. Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So what are you going to talk to us about today?
Yep, so I'm going to spend the next few minutes talking a bit about the entry-exit system and then an update on the EU-US trade discussions, which has been sort of headline news over the last few days. So just starting off with the ETIAS and the entry-exit system and Europe's digital borders. Now, I know there's been a lot of information circulating over the last few months on this topic, so I will keep this first section quite brief. And our brilliant consulting team at Fragment Consulting Europe are monitoring this really closely. So do check out their website for more information. So where do things stand at the moment? So the entry-exit system is expected to go live in October 2025. There was a specific launch date that was stated of the 12th of October, and it briefly appeared on the official site, but it's somehow sort of been removed rather mysteriously. So we are recommending planning for October 2025 in general as a time frame for our clients. Now, as many listeners will already be aware, the entry-exit system replaces the manual passport stamp, and it will be a fully automated biometric system at the borders. It will also track the entry and exit of non-EU nationals, and it will collect their biometrics. And this will link into a growing network of EU databases, so things like the Schengen Information System and the Visa Information System. So essentially the goal here being that there will be a single digital identity trail for all travellers. Now, in parallel, there is also the ETIAS. Now, essentially, this is similar to the US ESTA scheme. And what it does is introduce a pre-travel authorization requirement for visa-exempt nationals entering the Schengen area. So really crucially for employers, this means that there is going to be tighter enforcement, less room for error, and greater exposure for short-term business travelers who may not even realize that they are at risk of overstaying or perhaps misrepresenting their purpose of entry. So why is this important beyond just compliance? Because essentially digital borders are becoming tools of economic governance. And Julia talks a lot about work in this space when she's been on the show before. And essentially digital borders aren't just managing people, they are looking at who is participating in which economies, when and on what terms. Which brings me to the next topic quite nicely, which is the EU-US trade agreement. So this week, President Trump met with EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen in Scotland to finalise the terms of the new EU-US trade agreement. Now, the choice of venue was symbolically neutral, but I think quite politically loaded nonetheless, but essentially reinforcing the message that this deal is much more about recalibrating transatlantic power as it is about the tariffs. So this trade agreement, which is going to be announced formally and officially on the 1st of August, has real implications for mobility, investment and workforce planning across both markets, so the EU and the US. It introduces a 15% tariff across most imports, most, not all, from the EU into the US, which is higher than the typical US baseline of these reciprocal tariffs of 10%.
The baseline is 10%, isn't it? Yeah.
Exactly right. And some sectors actually might be more shielded than others. And so there's some news that's coming out that there may be a 0 for 0 carve out for semiconductors and potentially other strategic goods. But other areas, so things like automobiles, energy, steel, pharmaceuticals potentially, are remaining perhaps more exposed and may fall outside of that reciprocal 15% tariff rate. So how does it affect global mobility? Right, it's really at the moment underscoring a massive critical shift. Mobility is not just about immigration law; it really is about economic security, and we're seeing this with a lot of our clients, and who are being pushed to really realign their supply chains and their operations, and to rethink their location strategy and how that impacts workforce strategy. And at Fragment, together with Julia Onslow-Cole and Charlotte Wills, who was on the show last week, we're doing a lot of work in this workforce strategy space at the moment. So just to end on a couple of things for mobility leaders in terms of what they should do next when it comes to the trade and tariff discussion is, one, think about your workforce location if there are shifts because of your supply chain being impacted, and map key employee locations against tariff exposures, and also invest in workforce intelligence and advisory services to, again, what Charlotte was talking about last week in her session, really understanding how trade, tariff, and border digitization can intersect with your talent footprint. Something that, like I said, we're doing a huge amount of work on at Fragment. So with that,
well, that's just amazing. And I'll give you an extra 30 seconds on the show, because I just want to just let the audience know that you're currently a PhD student. You're doing a PhD in immigration. So just give us like the 30-second version of that, because it's absolutely
yeah, thanks, Burton. And having 30 seconds to describe what it is quite the challenge. So I'm looking at the UK hostile environment and how geopolitics can impact immigration systems, and ultimately how that then impacts your identity as a citizen. So looking at sort of second, third generation citizens in the UK and what their identity is.
You're getting a lot of applause coming in from the audience for that. I mean, it's so fascinating. So when you got that done, it sounds like you're just finishing it. We'd love to get you back one day to tell us all about it, because I think it's a fascinating story. Meanwhile, we do have to move on, I'm afraid. So that's but amazing work you're doing there. As Kristen put, that is awesome, Raj. Really, really important. And anybody, I'm sure, can reach out to Raj about that, because it's an interesting area. We're now going to move on from immigration to tax, and we have backstage one of our regulars, Julie Barron, who's going to be giving us a really important tax update. So everybody, you know how it works. Let's say a big thank you to Raj. She's been absolutely wonderful on her first occasion on the show. So as we say thank you to Raj, we welcome Julie Barron to the stage. Hit the heart button, hit the like button, and hit the applause button. Julie, welcome back to the show.
Hello, Brian. How are you?
I'm good. Looking forward to hearing my tax update.
Yes, exciting times. Well, there was a recent case between Germany and the Netherlands that kind of had me start thinking about the taxes in both of those countries. And I don't want to say do a little education, but maybe just talk to people about some different tax angles that in both of those countries. And then I'll talk about what this case means and what it was about. But here, I'll give you a little bit of a spoiler alert. They ruled in favor of the taxpayer. So good news there. We don't see a lot of that anymore. It seems to be getting more tricky to get good exemptions in Europe rather than in the taxpayer's favor. So anyway, so in Germany, they have something called exemption with progression. So in most countries around the world, if you pay tax in two countries, let's say you're working in one country and you're living in another, you usually get a foreign tax credit on that country where you're living for whatever taxes you're paying to another country. But in Germany and some other countries in Europe, they do what they call exemption with progression, which basically means they use all of your worldwide income to figure out your tax rate. So you end up in a high tax bracket, but then they just exempt whatever income is double taxed from your taxes. So if you make $100,000, they figure out what the tax is on that. Let's say it's 50. They take that 50% tax rate and they apply it to maybe only $20,000 of your income. So you pay tax at 50%, even though you only have to pay tax on $20,000. So it's a different way of calculating an exemption from foreign tax, so you're not double taxed, but not like the foreign tax credit, which we see in most countries around the world. So Germany in particular has this exemption with progression. And then we have the Netherlands. So the Netherlands has their 30% ruling, which they allow for expats. And the question is that an exemption from tax on 30% of your income, or really what is the 30% ruling? So the 30% ruling is more of a deduction from income because they allow the 30% ruling for expats to basically make up for the expenses that people have as an expat. So you have extra housing costs, you have extra education costs, you have different things that you're being compensated for while you're an expat in the Netherlands. So that 30% ruling is really to help with those expenses and make those tax-free. And one note from my colleagues in the Netherlands, they want to remind everybody that the 30% ruling will become the 27% ruling in 2027. So it's easy to remember, 27% in 2027. And you should be looking at your populations now, if you have people in the Netherlands, on that 30% ruling to figure out for payroll purposes how that kind of phases out over the next couple of years. Anyway, so our case today was about a German person living and working in Germany who wasn't, living in Germany, working in the Netherlands. So he was working in the Netherlands for a Dutch company, but living in Germany. So subject to tax in Germany on his worldwide income. But because he was an expat and he qualified for the 30% ruling, he was exempting 30% of his income from Dutch tax, which is nice, gave him a nice low Dutch tax rate. But originally, the German courts ruled that because that 30% ruling was in place, you couldn't exempt that income from German tax. But the German higher court came in and said, well, actually, it's subject to tax in the Netherlands, but it's a deduction that the individual gets to take on their return. So no, indeed, they can actually exempt the 30% from their German income taxes too. So the individual ended up in a really good spot where he's not paying Dutch tax on 30% of his income, but he also gets to exempt that from his German tax return. So I thought, well, this is great news for those. And I know we have so many cross-border individuals in Europe now where they, you can work in one country and live in another so easily, but very good news from a conceptual perspective that you can still get that ruling and not. Yeah. Yeah, I know it actually works and you can actually pay less tax. So many times nowadays we're seeing people, countries cracking down on taxpayers and not allowing all these exemptions. But in this case, it was a good answer. So I really like this. But hopefully everybody learned a little bit about exemption with progression, which they refer to as EWP actually, and the 30% ruling. Anyway, interesting times between those two countries.
Cool. Well, Julie, thank you very much. That is interesting. As you said, it's nice to hear a tax case where the taxpayer actually won.
Doesn't happen often.
Exactly. So we're now going to move on. We've done an immigration section. We've done a tax section. We've now got Laurie Ryan from Benevo, who's just going to give us a little bit of update on some AI stuff, because that is probably the third big leg these days of immigration, tax, and technology. So we're going to find out a little bit about some of this AI, or mobility intelligence, as we call it at Benevo. So you know how it works. We're going to say goodbye to Julie. Welcome to Laurie. Hit the heart button, hit the like button, and hit the applause button. Hey, Laurie, how you doing?
Doing great, Brian. Thrilled to be here.
Cool. So tell us a bit about BMI. And we've both got it written behind us on our pictures.
Fancy. I love it. Yes, the focus of today's update is going to be the big reveal of Benevo's mobility intelligence. We had 3 webinars last week and 260 corporate registrations. So I hope everybody's hitting the applause button for that, because we were very excited about the attendance. We know not everyone could make it. A few people didn't make it. We don't want you to have fear of missing out. We are going to show you in just a minute how you can contact us for a one-on-one. But first, there's something that relates to our conversation today related to immigration. With mobility intelligence, along with the program analyzer, there's an immigration planner that really helps guide you and ask you the questions. And we're told that that can save 2 to 3 hours, of work researching and getting this information. So very exciting opportunity there that I think ties into the conversation here. Additionally, what we hear from a lot of people, their concern about AI in general is accuracy and losing the human touch. And what Benevo does, for instance, with the program analyzer and all of the different agents or assistants that they have created, is we've done all the hard work for people. We've trained it on your programs and policies. We have vetted the sources, right? So that what you're getting is so much more reliable, and it's helping you so you don't have to think about what do I need to prompt. Or in the case of immigration, it's going to guide you. I think Tally mentioned this earlier, and ask you the questions in order to get those accurate results. So just a little bit there. But what I wanted to make sure everybody knew is that due to the overwhelming demand, we have also opened up 2 more spots for companies to implement mobility intelligence and our unlimited cost estimates for free.
Wow.
For the rest of the year. And to me, it's a no-brainer. I strongly recommend people click to learn more about that opportunity.
Want unlimited cost estimates for free, backed by AI. It's a fantastic offer.
And it's a great way to get familiar, right, with what these tools can do. Finally, we're planning our next product reveals in September, October, including exclusive in-person events in the US and Europe. More details coming soon, but lots of exciting stuff happening. Thrilled to be a part of it. Just very grateful.
Cool. Okay, that's amazing. We're now going to move on. I know a lot of people are tuned in because they want to hear the amazing Patti Warner talk to us about managing immigration anxiety. It is such an important subject. And as I said in my intro, it's a subject that we've never, ever talked about on this show. And as far as I know, nobody's ever talked about on any show anywhere ever in the world. So it's a real world premiere for thought leadership for a particular topic. So without further ado, we're going to move on to talk about managing immigration anxiety with the amazing Patti Warner. So you know how it works. As we say goodbye to Laurie and we say hello to Patti, hit the heart button, hit the like button, and hit the applause button. Hey, Patti.
Hi.
Hey.
Hi.
We're getting a lot of love out there. People, I can see hands clapping, hearts coming up, like buttons or what have you, which is just tremendous. So you've obviously got a lot of friends out there. If you want to say anything personal to Patti about how wonderful she is or something, put it in the comments and we'll try and put it to screen too. So exactly. So anyway, Patti, a lot of people know you, but some people don't. So tell us, who is Patti Warner? Tell us a bit about yourself.
Hello. Good morning from almost sunny California. I am at Ingram Micro in Irvine, California, Orange County, between LA and San Diego. We are a technology supplier distribution company. We have a platform that helps clients order any technology they might need to manage their business. And we are in 240 countries. I'm going to test myself this morning. Apologies to anyone who works here that I get that wrong, but we're all around the world, but headquartered here in Irvine. We have an office in Buffalo, New York. Shout out Buffalo. And so we have a pretty substantial U.S. immigration
the absolute best, says Justin Kidd. We agree. Fantastic.
We have relocation, immigration, tax. We do the whole works here at Ingram Micro.
Cool. And about yourself, how did you get into this game?
Accidentally. As many people know, no one grows up wanting to be in global mobility. I found my way several years ago into the industry and love it. It's a passion of mine. I can't imagine doing anything else at this point. So we have a great industry.
Yeah, we certainly do. So Patti, you and I were chatting a while ago. We were thinking about the topic that we should talk about. And as we were noodling on an idea, this thing about immigration anxiety came up, and we're already seeing comments coming up from here. I'm just let's see. Let's say Christian's comment. Let's just pull that one up. Here we got Nicola. He said, "Welcome." Oh, good to see Nicola. I think one of our regular viewers. He said, "I got immigration anxiety after almost 20 years in Germany. Identity crises reloaded." I think we've got one as well. My green card interview 26 years ago is still fresh in my mind. I mean, it is. I mean, actually, let me just ask a question of the audience. I'll ask it of you too, Patti. I put this on LinkedIn a few days ago. I said this. Okay, what best describes your emotions as you go through border control or customs and you're talking to the officers? What goes through? And I gave people a choice about how they feel. A choice of three. You can either say, "Oh, I'm breezy and confident," or you can say, "Well, actually, I'm slightly nervous," or you can say, "Well, actually, for some odd reason, I feel guilty." So, in the audience, just write in the comments, how do you feel as you go through border control? Do you feel just breezy and confident, or do you feel a bit nervous, or do you feel actually a bit guilty? Let us know. We'll try and pull some of your comments to the screen. But Patti, tell us from your perspective. What do you think about that as you're going, you personally, as a global mobility professional, as you go through border control or customs on your way either, into some overseas country or indeed on your way coming back home?
I chose slightly nervous. I think it's just a problem with the profession. We know too many horror stories. We know too many concerns people have. We listen to all of the input from around the world. And so I chose slightly nervous for me. For no reason other than just because I hear all the stories and I think about what if that were me.
Okay, and we've had a few comments coming in from the audience. So let's just see. Christian said, "When I had a green card going through with my US family, always scared and on edge." And let's see, Nazia said, "Depends on country." And I think Erin says, "Slightly nervous." I mean, so yeah, people have different views. As a matter of interest, when we did the poll, this is what the poll results showed. Here we go. 27% said breezy and confident. So that's only just over a quarter. And we had 59%, so nearly 60, saying they were slightly nervous. And then a further 14 were saying they felt guilty for some reason. So roughly speaking, nearly 3/4 of the people who were responding, and bear in mind our respondees were mainly global mobility professionals, were actually either slightly nervous or very nervous. And Christian says it became better when he became a US citizen. And Tally said, let's just take Tally's one. Sorry. She said, did I see Tally had a comment there? Yeah. "Why am I always feeling so slightly guilty when crossing border control? And also going through customs. I personally sometimes feel guilty. And I I got no idea why. Harvey said, I didn't answer on LinkedIn, so showing my input here. When I pass through the border control, I feel that their job is quite boring. Okay, well, that's an interesting one. So you're feeling a bit sorry for them, maybe, that they're having a tough day. I must admit, that's not particularly my emotion. I'm more worried about myself for some reason. Ferzine said, those secondary checks when you travel on advanced parole and return back to the US sometimes took under 20 minutes and sometimes took 4 to 6 hours, made me never want to connect anywhere other than home base. I don't miss connecting flights. That's all interesting. So let's just try and get a bit into this, Patti. What's going on here? I mean, what's your take on the psychology of it all? I mean, why are people feeling a bit either slightly nervous or indeed guilty when they shouldn't be feeling guilty? What's going on there?
Part of it, I think, is just our constant access to data and news and social media and the time that we spend. And it's always, I call it doom scrolling. You know, it's always the worst case scenarios that you hear about. You don't hear about, like Nicholas saying, he likes stamps and he likes visas. So it's fun for him. And so it's hard when if you look at news all the time, you're expecting something to happen. And so that, I think, is part of the nerves. This day and age, obviously here in the US, it's gotten a lot of attention. And so people are reacting to the attention that it receives, whether they are guilty or not, or doing something wrong or not. Sometimes it's hard to imagine what the worst case scenario would be. And then what happens if that happens to me or my family or my kids? You know, with phones being checked, there's all kinds of anxiety right now for anyone coming in or out in that case.
Yeah, and sometimes, I mean, you know, we're talking legal migration here. We're talking about people,
Yes.
You know, we're not talking about people crossing borders illegally. But even so, people can come in and they may be going in on one visa, you know, they may just be going in on a regular sort of ESTA or tourist visa or something, but actually they're doing a bit of, you know, is it work, is it business? They're doing something, and it's, you know, it's around the margins, and people can get nervous about, are they doing exactly the right thing? I mean, what's it like to put yourself in the shoes of the employees who are doing the business travel? I mean, you know,
I always try to, and that's part of the role for me for global mobility, is that empathy. And what would I do if I had kids crossing the border, or even business travelers? We have people who are very nervous. They want to make sure that they have prep for an interview. They want to make sure they know every answer to any possible question that may come up. We have people, like you say, they have the right paperwork, they have the right answers, and they're still nervous, which is understandable. And so just helping to coach them through those scenarios and helping to reinforce that they have the right paperwork, they have the right support, they have the right answers, and it'll be okay. And you know, we've I don't want to jinx myself, we've had good luck so far. But it's just, that's part of our role, I feel like, as global mobility, is just helping people work through that anxiety, whether it's a business traveler or a family coming in with children, without children. We have spouses sometimes that travel by themselves or travel with the kids. So just understanding that anxiety is part of our role, I feel like, and helping them navigate through that.
So do you proactively prep people, or is it if they approach you?
A little bit of both. Sometimes people have over-prepared, and sometimes that makes it more difficult because they think they know all the answers to everything, and then a question comes up and it completely throws them. So part of it is just making sure that they're comfortable with the resources that they have. They understand the paperwork that they're carrying with them, so they can answer any questions. We have some templates that we share with them about this you only provide if they ask for it. That's the best advice, I think, that I've seen, is only answer what is asked. You know, we've talked about verbal diarrhea, but sometimes when people get nervous, they overspeak. And so just helping people understand that it's okay to just answer what is asked and not worry about telling them things if they didn't ask for it. That's
a great point. You used the phrase verbal diarrhea, but that question of people just not wanting to sort of just tell their whole life story and everything they say, when actually, in many cases, in these situations, less is more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the prep. Our immigration partner provides that feedback. And so I've been able to repeat that a few times this week even. So just helping people understand that it's okay. You're not keeping things from them. You're telling them what they're asking. And that's the important part.
Okay, so we've got a few comments coming in, and I'll take them. But in the audience, I'd just be interested to know what your experience has been. Do you tend to prep people when they're going to go through border control for what they should be doing, or even for their visa interviews, their thoughts? So let's just take some of the comments. And Christian's made a great point here. He said, it was the risk being sent back whilst my family would go through border control. And that's because I think Christian said he was a green card holder, but his children were US citizens, presumably because they were born in the US. So, I mean, is that an issue that you've seen of people being scared, not so much for themselves, but for the impact on their family, because maybe the family could go through and they couldn't, or indeed the other way around?
Oh, very much so. And especially if you have teenage children, people that are old enough to know what's going on, if there's any trouble with their phones, if there's any trouble with things. I've seen a lot of anxiety with parents either traveling with one or both children. We have a lot of people who have had, children here in the United States. And so they are citizens and the parents may not be. So that's a very real point of anxiety right now, is when it is a mixed scenario for family members. Some may be green cards holders, some may be citizens. We have some that are temporary resident permit holders still, and their children are US citizens. So that's a very real fear for people in the United States right now, especially.
Yeah. What about this question of when you've got families and maybe the children don't have the same last name as the parent, or indeed the children could be a different color to the they're traveling with.
It happens a lot, even domestic travel here in the United States. People are having trouble at the airports. It's, there's paperwork that you can take with them, but I think people face that on a regular basis, and having to constantly prove that child belongs to you is a big source of anxiety for people. And I know there's instances where people just choose not to travel at all rather than go through that stress. Yeah.
We did a show, it must have been about 18 months ago or so, on divorce and the expat. And we talked about what happens when you're, traveling, and you might be traveling with your child, but you're then separated or divorced from the other parent, and the whole question about the risk of child abduction, and you're traveling without permission from the other parent. And one of the pieces of advice that was given is you should always travel with the child's birth certificate. And I don't know how many people actually do that, but do you think there's something similar here, that if you're traveling, you should maybe take some proof with you that the child you're taking is actually your child?
I think it depends on the country. I know sometimes there's countries, especially in Europe and Latin America, where there's a paper that you fill out that even if you're still married and you just happen to not be with your spouse and you're traveling with the child by yourself, it's a confirmation from that spouse that you have the right to take that child to a different country. We had that instance coming from Canada. They were just coming to the US for a few days, and the spouse wanted to bring the paperwork with them just in case. I don't see it as much coming into the US as it may be in other countries, but I think, traveling with the birth certificate and the passport is a lot of paperwork to take with you, but I could see why people would need to do that if that's a problem that they've run into, especially having to prove that child is yours. And if there is any kind of separation or, like you say, divorce, then there's probably extra paperwork. And it's one of those things we call it a back pocket. Keep it in your back pocket and use it only if necessary, because that's a document that you don't want to necessarily hand over to people and let it pass around.
Yeah, as Christian said, anything you say can be used against you, but being prepared, and it's so much harder these days because back in the day there was no social media, so people didn't have a digital footprint. But tell us a bit about what's going on at the moment with social media at the borders. To what extent are and I suppose I'm thinking particularly about the US here,
right?
US specifically targeting or looking at people's social media accounts?
Oh, very much so. In many cases for visa applications now, they are insisting that you list all of your social media accounts. They're especially looking at student visas. I'm sure everybody's heard. And so for those visa applications, people are being instructed to make your accounts public, and they are looking at them. I saw one instance the other day where the person was denied the visa because they had an account that they did not list, even though it was not any problem. They just found an account for that person that they hadn't even used in 5 years. And they denied their visa as a result because they said they were not truthful on the application. I think that the students, the F1, we call them the F1 students, are being looked at very closely, but they are looking at that for others. People coming into the US, they're looking at their phones. They're looking to see what pictures they may have, what, the memes that they may have, what they've posted. So I know there's a lot of talk about burner phones and all kinds of things, or just not having a phone at all, which would be very, very difficult for a lot of people these days traveling. So it's just things people are having to think about now that they didn't before. But social media makes it so easy to just say whatever's on your mind. And a lot of times people don't think about the consequence when they post something because it's online, it's just on the computer. So a lot of people don't think about the impact that it may have if they are traveling or if they're going somewhere else.
I've heard stories, and I'd be interested if anybody in the audience wants to comment on this. I've heard stories about US citizens being worried about leaving the US and coming back in.
Correct.
And not taking with them maybe their laptop, or, as you said, getting burner phones because they don't want to have their social media or indeed anything else, might even be client information, looked at when they're traveling. I mean, how much is that really happening, or how much is that sort of?
It's happening a lot more, I think, than people realize. I don't want to give any legal advice because I probably would get it wrong about what U.S. citizens can and can't be subject to as far as a search. But there are multiple instances of people who are detained at the airport that are U.S. citizens because either they would not turn over their phone, they would not turn over the passport or the password to open the phone. So it's a very crazy time right now when you travel.
Okay.
There's a lot of tricks that I've heard about, take off your facial recognition and all kinds of things. And so it's definitely a legal question about what can and can't happen for US citizens and green card holders at the airport. I just try not to I take care of it by not posting anything on social media that might be political. So, but otherwise, yeah, there's a lot of people who are concerned.
We're not going to get into the legal aspects of this here now because neither of us are immigration attorneys. Right. But I'm just interested in the psychology of it. The fact that even if this isn't happening to the extent it is, people think it's happening. Mm-hmm. It's the fact that people think it's happening.
Right.
Is creating that sense of trepidation.
Well, exactly. And I do think that a lot of that goes back to social media and the prevalence of social media in our lifetime. You read about it, you see it, you hear it. You don't hear on social media the good stories very often. Oh, I went through and it was fine. It was 20 minutes. It was no problem. That's boring. So you don't hear about that on social media. So I do think that it blows it out of proportion a bit. But it's not to say that it doesn't happen, because it absolutely does.
Okay. Nicola's raised a point which we haven't touched on actually, which is anxiety comes from non-native speakers having to differentiate between the word business and the word work. I mean, maybe just generally talk about non-native speakers, because I think we've assumed so far that everybody going in is speaking the language of the customs of the border official. But in most cases, or many cases, you will not be a native speaker of the country that you're going to. Tell us a little bit about language issues.
I think that's part of it. And to his point, if you're coming on a B1, B2 here in the US, that's a business visa and you're not working. And so that's exactly right. As people, if you are coming to a meeting, you're coming to a meeting at work. And so it's hard to differentiate between those two. And the environment that we're in these days, wording matters and the context matters. And so, if people are nervous and they say the wrong thing, that could cause extra screening and additional time at the airport. And so that's part of the prep too, that we talk to people about. If they're business travelers, what does that mean? What they can and can't do. Many of them have come in and out multiple times. Like I saw a few people here recently that I was like, oh, hey. So it's good that people are getting through and understanding that. But yes, you're exactly right. Non-native English speakers, I think, have a harder time and they may need a little extra help.
Okay. And here's a comment, quite slightly amusing comment from Jeremy Chander, who in fact has been a guest on this show in the past, owns Pinewood Relocations, a great friend of the show. And he says, enjoyed a beer with a customs official at Marseille airport. And he was then the person that checked my bag when I went through to the customs lounge. We were good friends by that time. I mean, nice. So that's incredible. He was obviously drinking on duty as well. But I'd love to hear more about that, Jeremy, if you want to share it at some point. But a fascinating story there. I suppose it just brings back the fact, and sometimes we forget it, is that these people, the officials at the border and in customs, they're human too, and they're going to go back home to their families, and they can have good days and bad days, and maybe sometimes we forget that at the end of the day they're just trying to do their job too.
Exactly, and it's just like I say, they have a job to do. Whether you agree with the job that they're doing or not is a different story, but I think attitude is a big part of it. How you go through and anticipate things helps make your experience in a little more positive, hopefully.
Okay. So one word that you've used a lot, Patti, when we're prepping for the show, and I want to bring it out, is the word empathy in mobility. And, we talk about mobility, we talk about, relocation and tax and immigration and technology and this and that. But maybe empathy isn't a word we talk about that much. And I think it is important because what's happening whenever we're moving somebody from A to B, we're basically disrupting their life a bit. It's always a bit traumatic. It's only a question of how traumatic it is. So tell us about empathy and what it is in a mobility context and what we can all do to be more empathetic.
I think that's a lot of times what's missing in today's society in general is just thinking about what if this were me? What would I do and how would I do things? And so many times the thought process is, well, it doesn't affect me. But then you see other people and it's like, okay, it does affect them. So how can I help them through that? And that's human nature. And I think we all need to have a lot more empathy these days about what other people are going through. And that's how I try to do my personal life, my business life, is just imagining what if it were me, and then helping people through that as if it were me or my family that were going through things. The saying is death, divorce, and relocation are the top 3 stressors in life. And so imagine, I tell people going from country to country and, you're going to a place where you may not speak the language or speak it well. And so just understanding that really helps me put myself in their shoes and think about what I would want if I were going through that situation. And that's really a big point of mobility. It's a soft skill that's hard to teach. You either have it or you don't. And so a lot of people, I think, in mobility are really good at this because we see how it impacts families. We see how the children are impacted, the spouses are impacted. I tell people it's my job to get the whole family to point B, not just the employee in their new job, but the dogs, the cats, the kids, the spouse, Everybody needs to be settled in the new location. And whether that's immigration or relocation, that's part of the job that we all signed up for.
Yeah, and it is. He said it is traumatic. I mean, Nicholas said not a bit of disruption. It is a major change and a major disruption. Tricky is, and that becomes only visible after the initial moving to a new place. That's true. And actually, I remember you saying to me, Patti, what it brought it home to you was you at Ingram Micro, you relocated quite a few people when the war broke out between Russia and Ukraine.
We did.
And that obviously you were having a real impact on people's lives. And you had a conversation with one of your transferees at some point afterwards. So I don't know if you can share anything about that.
I did. This is one that's going to stay right here in my heart. We moved 142 people out of Russia immediately as soon as the war started. But obviously it took several months. Some of them have ended up in various places, and I had the opportunity to meet a family. And when they came to California, and the associate looked at his wife and he pointed at me and said, "She is the reason we are safe." Wow. And that still gives me chills, but it will stay in my heart because I told our providers at the time, this is why we do this. You know, we always say it's not life or death, but in some cases it could be. And so that's where empathy comes in. You know, people are frightened in many cases if they have to move. The children are frightened, the pets are frightened. And so just understanding that, but that really hit home for me. He said, "She is the reason we are safe." It was a team, obviously, but that, you know, that's going to stay right here in my heart for the days where I feel like I'm not doing enough. And so that helped me, but that's a story that was a big one for me.
Yeah, it does raise a question. Actually, Ferzine made a comment, another great friend of the show, but I'll take the comment and make it slightly wider. She says, "I also think that as global mobility experts, it is our role to empower our people to travel on the right visas for, in the appropriate category, and not just push visa processing under a different category, get them in sooner because of business pressure and demands." And I think what Ferzine might be getting at there is sometimes, as I talked a bit before, it can be a bit of a grey area. Is it work? Is it business? Oh, well, you know, they can go on just a normal tourist visa and it should be okay. But actually, heaven forbid it's not okay. First of all, you're giving them anxiety. But secondly, you might end up having them deported or refused entry or something. And I suppose that puts us as mobility professionals in a tricky position because we're trying to do what's best for the employee. We're trying to do what's best for the business. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the business is going to want us to sort of maybe sweep things a bit under the carpet, and you know, and that's a pressure we can have, which actually then becomes stressful for us, let alone for the poor person traveling. Is that something that is widespread? I mean, well, I know it's widespread, but I'd be interesting to know what people say about that in the comments about whether there's ever been that sort of stress to maybe sort of look at things.
Most definitely. And I think some of it is company culture. Some of it is regional specific. You know, as Americans, sometimes we feel like we have the right to go wherever we want, and that doesn't necessarily mean we can work there. So, you know, we've had to have that conversation. I've had that conversation multiple times over my career is, no, you can't just show up with your spouse and your kids and all your suitcases and say, "I'm here on a business trip." So that is a question a lot. I've had to say to executives, "Does airport jail sound like a good time to you?" And they go, "Oh, no, it sure doesn't." So company culture is a big part of that, but it is definitely a conversation that comes up a lot when you tell people how long the immigration may take.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, actually, Jeremy again made another comment here. He says, "When mobility budgets are reduced, empathy can become more challenging." And he says, 2 of our clients divorced after staying in the UK for just 6 months, and one of them returned to the US when they were not authorized by their employer to bring their dog to the UK. That is tragic. That not a silly thing, but a thing relatively as small as a pet can disrupt the entire assignment. But that's exactly what we need to be alert to. We're going slightly off on a tangent here. It's really sort of the anxiety of the visa process. What tips would you give somebody, if they've got to go along for an interview to get their visa? What are the tips that you're going to give them to manage their anxiety at that point?
Part of what I tell people is look them in the eye when you speak to them. Only answer what is asked. If people don't make eye contact and they look sweaty and nervous, even if they have the right paperwork, oftentimes the immigration provider or the customs official might think they are trying to hide something when they're not. And so just helping with confidence. And like I say, answer what is asked, make eye contact, hold your head up, act like you belong there because you have the right paperwork, you have the right answers. That's a lot of times what I try to tell people is just, tell the truth, always tell the truth.
Yeah. I mean, do people hold mock interviews for people saying this is what you should be expecting? You're going to go along to a consulate or an embassy to apply for your visa, and then here's a mock interview. I've not really heard of people doing it. I'm just wondering whether we should, especially as the environment becomes more hostile.
Our immigration provider does coaching sessions. I don't think it's a mock interview necessarily. I've not been on them, but it's more of here are the kind of questions you could anticipate. And then they talk through what the right answers would be and just help them prepare for the interview that way. But I don't know if it's necessarily a mock interview, but that could work. It just depends, I think, on the person and how much time they have. If you have a program that has 1,000 or more people coming in, it might be difficult. But if you have a smaller program, that may be something to consider for sure.
Yeah, I suppose you could even use technology to do practice interviews. That may well be coming. But right. Nicola put a comment here. He put, I can pinpoint precisely how many identity crises I had on my immigration journey. Tell us more, Nicola. He goes, taking into consideration the rhetoric towards immigrants or migrants, if you don't feel the anxiety, you are an AI, not human. Last elections in Germany and the US led to the latest crises at my end. In other words, I think what Nicola's saying is that feeling anxious in the current anti-migrant environment that a lot of countries have, if you don't feel anxious, there's something wrong with you. I think that's what he's saying. I mean, so we're saying this is a natural reaction.
Yeah, it for sure. And there's a lot of, it won't happen to me. And then it does, or it doesn't happen to anybody I know. And then it does. And so that's part of the empathy, though, is just because you may not see it doesn't mean it's not happening for other people. And that's, that's part of our role in global mobility, is just help people prepare for that and focus on the things we can control.
Yeah, we're getting towards the end of the hour, but just tell us why, sum up, why is it that proactive and transparent communication between you in mobility and your transferees is now more important than ever, given this sort of environment we live in?
Well, it goes back to what we can and can't control. And, we can't control politics. We can't control what administration is doing what. And so we made the decision here at Ingram Micro to be proactive and to be as transparent as possible and get information to people as quickly as possible so they can make plans for their families, for themselves, for their travel. And that's what we try to do here because we can control that. And so if, something new happened on Friday, so by Monday, we were able to put out a message to our whole group and say, here's what you need to think about. So that's the decision that we made, is just the only thing we can control is ourselves and our own messaging. And so that's how we do it here.
Okay, we're getting towards the end of the hour, so I'm going to bring back onto stage our wonderful producer, Tally, my Benevo contact, my Benevo colleague, Laurie. I'm afraid that Raj and Julie have had to go on to other meetings, but this is our last show of the summer. We're back September the 10th, I believe. Is that right?
Yes.
We're back September 10th. Meanwhile, what we want to do is we want to wish you, everybody out there in the audience, the most wonderful summer. We hope you're having some nice quality time with your family, your loved ones, you're having some vacation. And as I said, we are going to show a few classic episodes on Wednesdays, just to keep this slot in your diary, in your calendar. But we will be back on September 10th. In the meantime, everybody, it's goodbye from all of us at the View from the Top, and we wish you a very, very great summer vacation. Take care, everybody. See you in September.
Bye.
Bye.